This is Zombie Chickens podcast, where two heads are better than one, even if they're undead. My name is Marnay.
And my name is Megan.
And in this podcast, this is the 11th podcast.
Yes, it is the 11th episode, yes.
Okay, so in this episode, or the series of episodes, we will be not interviewing, we will be exploring, thank you. We will be exploring different cultures, different folklores. So in every episode we will take a country and we will basically, each of us will find a folklore that we find interesting and we will tell the story about it and discuss it. So for this one, we decided on South Africa since it's our home country.
So keep in mind with these stories that it is the stories we grew up with. There is so many different cultures and backgrounds and...
Because we have 11 official languages.
Yeah, so we have so many different ethnicities and backgrounds and cultures in our country. So there's so many different folklores. So this is just like a fraction of what we actually have in South Africa. So I would actually suggest, if anyone is interested, to go do research by themselves, because even like
it's difficult. It's very difficult because I was so confused and just couldn't decide on what stories to do because it's so interesting.
Yes, and I chose ones that I grew up with that I actually sort of know. That's why I chose them. But there's so many different like Zulu and Xhosa ones and all those ones. There's so many different African folklores because there's so many that I actually saw. But anyway, so I'm just doing the ones that I grew up with because I just know it a bit more. I'll start with the Ghost of Uniondale. I will be doing this because it was a request by my father so many times because he obviously grew up with it.
And everyone knows the story and everyone is scared of that story.
Yeah, and I feel like every different area in South Africa had a different tale from the Ghost of Uniondale because I remember it being very prominent in where I grew up.
I think it's because you're closer.
It was probably because we were closer, but they spoke of it as if it happened in the town we grew up in. I'm like, no, it's not.
But it's the same with the ghost story. I'm sort of interrupting you.
No problem.
The ghost story of the ghost house in Gordons Bay.
Oh, yes.
Now, I knew Gordons Bay quite well, even though I didn't live here by then. Because we went on very holidays to Royals, which is very close, which is past Gordons Bay, and we would always drive past the ghost house of Gordons Bay. And that story is very much the same. And I mean, that house stayed like that for almost more than what I can recall, more than 20 years. It stayed in a very rundown state. And only, I think, a couple of years ago when I drove past it again, I saw it was for sale. And only after that, when it was for sale or someone bought it, they made up the house again. So it looks quite nice now. But I think that story was something in the lines of a husband that murdered his wife and then he murdered himself. I can't even remember the story anymore. But it's
murder-suicide.
Basically.
Isn't that like basically how most haunted house story starts?
I really can't remember how that story started. I just remember as a child being very fascinated with that house because every single time we drove past, because remember, I know Royals very well. We went there almost every month. Yeah. Maybe twice a month we went there for a weekend because we always drove past, or even just went to Gordons Bay for the day and had ice cream at Uncle Barry's. Yeah. And you would sort of see that house. Or we would drive past that house because I would always ask my grandfather, please can we drive past the house? Because I found it very interesting, this ghost house of Gordons Bay.
Yeah, so see, I don't really know much about it because by the time I moved here, we were already older, so things like that wasn't like...
It affects you differently.
It affects you differently, especially because you hear these tales as a child, and then you
fantasize about
exactly.
it. You think about, oh shit, I saw someone in the window.
Yeah.
Meantime, it's just
a shadow I love ghost stories and hauntings and things like that, but like you say, it affects you differently when you're older. So, and I don't think I don't hear much about it when I moved here.
I think by then it's it's an old story.
It's an old story. No one
cares anymore,
and they think everyone knows about it.
Yeah,
they don't like. It's not a normal conversation. Part of conversation.
It's funny for me how that house stayed, and I don't know who owned it. But I can't remember. I think I should do some research about this house.
Yes, definitely.
Because now thinking back, I just remember how interesting it was to see that house in that state. And I remember it's sort of not on a cliff, but it's, help me out. It's like...
On a hill?
Yes, basically on a very steep hill.
Oh,
and it's between very, very, very expensive houses. We're talking about houses
is it there on the mountainside?
I think I've shown you one or twice.
Probably, but I my memory.
It's a long time ago, but it's a house between, very really expensive houses.
So it does look very weird.
It does stand out.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, one of the reasons why, it's sort of, people didn't talk about it anymore because it's such an old story.
Okay. Well.
But anyway, your story.
Yes, my story. The Ghost of Uniondale. The Ghost of Uniondale is probably South Africa's most well-known highway ghost. And also, I will link all the sources we have used for this episode. I will link it in the description of the episode. Oh, and by the way, even to this day, the people of Uniondale still tell new people about it. It's still an attraction for them. But Uniondale is really, really tiny in South Africa. It's a very...
Where's Uniondale again?
It's close to... do you know where Baviaanskloof is?
Yeah, I've been to Baviaanskloof.
It's close to there. Yeah, so it's in that area. Which to our listeners will probably not know where that is, but yes.
It's a small town in South Africa.
Yes. So the story starts on the evening of the 12th of April, 1968. And by the way, the 12th of April is one day after my birthday, so... Anyway, when a recently engaged couple, Maria Rue and G.M. Pretorius...
Very, very South African.
Very South African. Were travelling from Graaff-Reinet to Riversdale. They, however, never made their destination. Pretorius lost control of the vehicle just outside Uniondale, and they were involved in a horrible accident. Pretorius was injured, and when the wreck was found by a local farmer the next morning, Maria was dead. A few years later, in 1976, motorists started seeing a woman in white alongside the road where the accident took place. Some motorists picked her up. Minutes later, they would hear a shrill laugh, the sound of a door closing, and an icy chill would be felt inside the car. This became known as the Ghost of Maria Rue. Of Maria Rue. I say it as if I'm not Afrikaans, but anyway. It is also said that the local police department kept some sugar water available to calm tourists who came to report seeing a ghost. The story further goes that Pretorius got married a year after the tragic accident, and that is why Maria became restless, the fact that her fiancé had found love in the arms of another woman. When Pretorius himself died in a car accident in 1984, Maria stopped appearing. She was appeased at last. Which, weirdly enough, I still heard of sightings. They say the story that she didn't appear after 1984, but I remember as a child hearing stories of her appearing by that time as well, and that was 1998 to about 2000s. So
I remember reading people citing her as well, but doesn't it remind you of that one episode in Supernatural?
When I first saw that episode in Supernatural, I was like, Ghost of Uniondale. Yes. I literally said it. I was like, that is...
A lady in white.
That is purely the Ghost of Uniondale. And I think every single country has...
A lady in white.
Has a highway ghost. Because it's a thing in, like, Korea as well. And I know that from my K-dramas. But I also... I know in other countries it is a thing as well. So it's not just in South Africa.
Everyone has
a highway ghost. But I think there's more highway ghosts, but this is the most well-known one, that it actually went from one state to the other state, because remember where I grew up compared to where you grew up, and we both know of the Ghost of Uniondale.
Exactly. And we did both grow up with two different separate provinces.
Definitely.
Yeah, we call it
provinces, but it's a state.
It's a state, basically. And like Megan said, we both grew up in different states, and we do know about the story. Because I think my grandfather told me about the Ghost of Uniondale, or I read about it, or it was told by someone at some, school camp, or you heard about, the Ghost of Uniondale.
Exactly.
And like I said, I've been to Baviaans Kloof.
And the thing, like, my dad's family grew up close to Uniondale, so they have a big history in that part of South Africa, and that's why he grew up with it. But even my mother, who lived also quite far away, closer towards quite far away, she also knew of the Ghost of Uniondale.
It's a very well-known story.
It is a very well-known story. Yeah, so that's my story of a Ghost of Uniondale.
Love it.
Yeah, so things like this is always... I feel like it's more towards like a myth or legend rather than a folklore, but it still counts as one of those... Because it is definitely one that, especially that most of South Africa knows about it.
Afrikaans people, I would say.
Probably,
the English people.
I'm not sure about the English people. It's probably more towards Afrikaans because it was a Afrikaans family.
And not just that, but Afrikaans people are very superstitious. They are very superstitious.
Yeah, but so is I feel like the Xhosas are also very...
Zulu, a lot of them as well.
Yeah. So I feel like South Africa is just superstitious in general. Like the whole of South Africa is just like, even Africa is just like
a superstitious
continent. Everyone is just like, no.
Oh, that's so funny.
Because I have a friend that he actually had holy water went with holy water everywhere. And when he entered a room, he would throw holy water. I don't know if it was more to shock people around him, or it was to actually vent out bad spirits. But
use sage, burn sage as you walk around. That's more, I think.
Well, if you're in an enclosed space where there can't be smoke, I feel like the next best thing is holy water.
Fuck. Okay.
So people do that. So that's, I don't know if, and that is pure superstition. Yeah.
Or people walking along the street and whistling. Because back in the day, when you whistled, it was a way to banishing bad spirits. And also whistling was also banned. Or not banned, it was ill thought of to whistle in a, not an opera house, a
theatre?
A theatre. Because whistling was used for people to drop down the different sceneries. And they believed that if you were down there and you whistled, a person would drop down a piece of scenery and you would die.
You would die. Huh.
Very strong superstition in the theatre.
I really thought people are just whistling when they're walking on the street because they're bored and they want to occupy their mind.
That's mainly the cases, but back in the day, I want to say back in the day, but way back when people were more superstitious.
That's how it probably started. Not just people minding their own business and just whistling a tune. I can't whistle a tune, so that it's not happening. It can't help me at all. I could just normal whistle, and that's just not. Yes. That's not very entertaining. Anyway, what is your story?
Anyway, my story is one of my favorites, actually.
Yeah.
So it's the story of Van Hunks and his pipe. So just to give a little backstory, again, this is very Cape Townian, very, very, very Cape Townian. Those of you who don't know, we have Table Mountain. It's one of the seven wonders of the world. Educate yourself, go read up about it. And Table Mountain is smack in the middle.
Natural wonders of the world.
Natural wonders of the world, yes, thank you. If you don't know it, educate yourself, go learn about it.
I think that's the only reason why people know South Africa. And
Cape Town. Cape Town is because of Table Mountain.
Definitely.
And not just that, one of the other backstories that you need to understand is that we have a lot of wind in Cape Town. A shitload of wind, especially if the southeasterly comes. And something very interesting, and I think we should probably, I wish we could actually put it in with the episode. It's just a photo of Table Mountain with this tablecloth. We call it the tablecloth because it's a white, not a mist, it's sort of like a white cloud that sort of billows over Table Mountain. It's actually quite beautiful. But that normally happens when we have wind. But okay, so do you know the story? You probably know the story because it's also a very well-known story.
I actually do not know the story.
Really? I think I must have told you about it.
Maybe, but that must have been like so long ago. I don't... Again, I only have so much brain capacity, so I need to reserve it for things that matter.
Oh, Jesus.
Like K-dramas and anime.
So you're counting on me remembering the Van Hunks story that I've learned since primary school.
See, because I lived so far away from Cape Town when growing up, it's not something we spoke about. We spoke about Uniondale.
Yeah, exactly. See, it's like a province thing,
yeah,
or state thing, if you must.
If you must.
Okay, so many years ago, when the first Dutchman came to the Cape, Devil's Peak was still called Windberg. No, that's just Wind Mountain, basically.
Yeah.
And Table Mountain had no white cloth. In those days, on the slopes of the mountain, lived a man called Van Hunks. His little house was the haunt of rough sailors, and women and children were afraid of him, and the law-abiding burghers of Cape Town eyed him with suspicion. So when one day Van Hunks sailed out of Cape Town harbour and vanished across the sea, no one missed him very much. For years and years he was gone, and his little house stood empty while the weeds grew between the flagstones. Then, one day, Van Hunks came home again. But the man who swaggered up the Herengracht was a very different man from the Van Hunks who had sailed away all those years ago. He was booted and spurred, with his buttons, which were blood-red rubies, winked in the sun, and he glittered all over with silver and gold. There were pistols tucked in his belt, and a sword hung at his side. After him swaggered slaves carrying sea-chested bound in iron and heavy with pirates' loot. For that is how Van Hunks had grown rich. Many was the ship that he and his ruffians had sent to the bottom of the sea. Many the throat they'd cut to fill those chests with treasure. So he came back to live in a little house on the mountainside with his ill-gotten wealth. But he found he was very lonely. The people of Cape Town were afraid of his daggers and guns. They were afraid of the old pirate whose riches has cost the lives of men. When the ships anchored in the bay, he dared not go down and enjoy the bustle. Instead, he would climb the slopes of the Windberg to a cave where he sat and smoked in peace. So when ships hove into sight, their sails fat-bellied with wind, Van Hunks would take out his telescope and watch them by the hour. And all the time he puffed his pipe while the grey smoke billowed out of the cave. And if there were no ships in sight, he kept an eye on the slaves tilling his land. In the evening he sat alone smoking his calabash pipe and fingered his pistols as he remembered the sea fights of days gone by. One day he sat smoking in the cave of the Windberg. A tall man dressed in black came up to the path. He was dark, strange-looking man with a long chimney pot hat. So I assume it's one of those massive
top hats. What do you call it? Bowler hats.
Top hats. Abraham Lincoln top hats.
Yeah.
Those massive ones. His boots didn't seem to fit his feet, for he walked stiffly, as if he were lame. In his right hand he carried a long-stemmed pipe. "Good day, mynheer," said the stranger, for in those days they still spoke Dutch at the Cape. He sat down, uninvited, on a rock beside the old pirate. May I ask your name? Everyone knows my name, said Fannings gruffly. Where have you been, that you don't know me? Fannings of Table Bay? The stranger laughed. I asked merely by the way of courtesy. I've heard of you. For some reason, Fannings felt himself shiver. Tell me who you are, or I'll be off, he said. I don't like name guessing. Oh, don't worry about me, said the dark man soothingly. All I meant was that we are both great pipe smokers, you and I. I see you have a fine calabash pipe and a large bag of tobacco. Now, where I come from, there's nothing we like more than a really good smoke. Is that so? Fannings picked up his ears. Let me tell you something. I've sailed the 7 seas, and I could tell you tales that would turn your hair white. Now, where in the world have I met a man who would outsmoke Fannings? And so he divided the tobacco into 2 big piles. They filled their pipes. Fannings struck a spark from his tinderbox, fired the wick, and lit the pipes, and the 2 of them began to puff while the smoke drifted in clouds from the cave and away on the wind. As they sat, the stranger regarded Fannings keenly from under his great black hat, and complimented him on his excellent tobacco. And they swapped yards, and what yarns! Stories of sea battles and fearful murders, of sinners and their wicked deeds, each one more terrible than the last. And all the while those 2 calabash pipes poured forth smoke till billowed from the cave and spread over the mountainside like a thick grey shawl. The birds flew away. Steenbok sought shelter in the thickets. The silver tree sighed and shuddered in the misty wind, and the burghers of Cape Town stared up and wondered what had happened to their mountain. So horrible were these stories that Fannings thought that at last the stranger could only listen in silence. As he listened, he smoked, and as Fannings talked, he smoked too. For days and nights they sat there, till that the world was drowned in smoke from their pipes. At last the stranger could smoke no more. He was green in the face and sick from the terrible shag of Fannings' tobacco. Enough, he cried. No more. You have beaten me, Fannings. You smoke your black tobacco like a madman. What did I tell you? Crowed Fannings. Now you have to admit that Fannings of Table Bay is the greatest smoker of them all. Why, I'll wager I could outsmoke old Nick himself. Obviously, the devil. As he said that, the stranger began to laugh, and he laughed so much that the chimney pot hat fell off, and lo and behold, on the crown of his head were 2 horns. Fannings stared in terror, and he realized that the devil himself had come to fetch him. In his fear, he offered him his finest whiskey and brandy if he could only go away and leave him yet a while. No, said the devil, you have outsmoked me. It is true, Fannings. You have won the first round, but I shall win the second. Now, for it is time for you to join me in a land of fire and brimstone, where I assure you, will feel quite at home. But I have to tell you that it took some persuading before Fannings would go along with the devil, and they had quite a fight up there in the Windberg. Lightning snapped and thunder rumbled along the crags, and wind from hell, the blackest southeaster you have ever heard, howled over the saddle and blew down the white smoke that blotted out the mountain. When day dawned again, and the wind had died, and all the cloud has blown clean away, there was no sign of the devil or the old pirate. What became of Fannings' treasure and slaves, no one ever knew. But one thing is certain, even the devil finds it hard to get along with Fannings sometimes. Now and then the 2 old scoundrels fall out and challenge one another to smoke in the cave, on what we now call devil speak. The angrier they get, the harder the southeaster blows. And if they're furious, it howls over the saddle and then tosses high into the sky, and the great white shoals of smoke lie over Table Mountain. Smoke from the pipes of Fannings and the devil. So that's the story of Fannings.
Okay.
And how Table Mountain got his cloth.
Now I understand why I don't know it. And I don't think you've told me.
Is it? I thought I did.
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay. That's a very interesting way of thinking. That's why the clouds are over the mountains. So that was your story about Hunks and
what did you think about it?
It was good. It was interesting.
Like I said, it's one of my favorite stories.
I've seen his name a few times pop
in
up
Cape Town. In Cape Town, you
different-
see his name. I know there's a restaurant with the name Van Hunks. There's a pumpkin beer with the name Van Hunks. I think we drank it once. It was quite weird.
I'm not
Spicy.
sure. But also in the different folklore, there's more than one story about Van Hunks. Not just. I saw a couple other ones as well. And I feel, but it's in South Africa. There's usually recurring characters like the jackal, the lion.
The jackal
the
a lot
baboon.
because the jackal is normally referred to as the deceitful.
Yeah. So there's a lot of recurring characters in South African folklore.
No, definitely. So what's your second one?
My second one. So the next one I'll do is The Witch and of the Hex River Valley. So this one I don't know that well because it's not where I grew up. It's from the Matroosberg.
Beautiful mountain range.
Yes. So the story goes. The Hex Valley is surrounded by high mountains. The highest peak is Matroosberg, where on the lower crags a lovely young woman makes her appearance on certain moonlit nights, crying and wringing her hands. But she has been dead for many long years. She was Eliza Meyring, daughter of a farmer whose housestead was not far from the foothills where Matroosberg rises from the vineyards. She lived in the middle years of the 19th century. She had many suitors because she was very beautiful, but she was also a bit spoiled and self-centered. She fell in love with a young man whose name was Frans. To satisfy her pride, she demanded that to marry her, Frans must first go and pick a red disa in the kloofs of the Matroosberg. Okay, so a kloof is a wooded ravine or a valley. The disa is a beautiful flower, but unfortunately it grows only in the most inaccessible places, against steep, mossy cliffs in shady ravines and gorges. So to pick a disa is an almost impossible task without mountaineering equipment, which did not exist in those years. Frans promised to bring her a red disa, for he loved Eliza with all his heart too. He went into the Groothoek Kloof alone. So that's like big corner valley. Saw the disas where they glowed in their beauty against a wet mossy cliff, and tried to reach it. But as he reached for a precious flower, he slipped and fell to his death. When they brought Eliza the news that her lover had fallen to his death with a disa in his hand, she was beside herself with grief and remorse. In fact, she was so overcome because she had caused the death of her only love with her demand that she became mentally ill, and her parents kept her locked in a bedroom to watch over her. She scratched her name on the wooden windsill, Eliza 1868. But one moonlit night she broke out and escaped. Wearing only her long white nightgown, she went into the foothills and then up the trail Frans had taken. There, somewhere on a rocky outcrop, she sat down and sobbed. But the outcrop crumbled beneath her, and she too fell to her death. Now Eliza still wanders the crags of the Matroosberg. Why do I say it in an English accent? Matroosberg. When the moon is full, a pale ghost in a long white dress. She is known in Afrikaans as the Hex van Hex Rivier.
The witch.
Which means the witch of Hex River. They renovated the house, the homestead of her father, and her name is actually still carved in the windowsill.
Jesus.
Yeah, so it is actually a true story, but the ghost is obviously is based on a true story. I think most of these folklores are based on some sort of true events.
Yes. But can I tell you something interesting about the disa? It's true. They literally only grow on very steep ridges.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to find. The closest I can think of comparing this flower, it's actually a beautiful flower. You get them in different colors. The red one is the most common one. They're now on the extinct list.
Yeah.
Because they only grow in the Western Cape. The closest flower I can represent to that is the edelweiss, because the edelweiss also grows on steep cliffs.
Yeah.
And the only insect that pollinates the disa is only found in the Western Cape.
What?
It's a butterfly. It's a certain type of butterfly.
So
Not a pretty butterfly, it's like a brown butterfly. But
it's still a butterfly.
It's the only butterfly, and it's also, I think, on the extinct list that pollinates this flower.
Damn.
And the disa is also the
Flower of the
Western Cape.
Yeah.
Flower of the Western Cape.
So if you watch rugby and if you ever seen
Viapia
play
WP,
the Western Province play rugby, you would see that flower.
Yes, the flower on the as the crest.
Yes.
So that's an interesting thing about the disa flower.
Yeah.
I never knew there was more than one species, but there is more than one. And I think all of them are on the extinct list as well.
Yeah.
But it's a cool story. I think I've heard of it, but I never knew about the windowsill. That's quite scary.
Yeah, that is quite scary. But it actually is, to this day, it's still there, which is really crazy to think about, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never heard of it because obviously this is more of a local to the area story. It's not necessarily
if you don't
such
know,
a well-known...
If you don't know the Matroosberge or the Hex River,
yeah.
you won't know of it.
Yeah, you won't know of it.
It's a beautiful area, though.
So, die Hex van Hex Rivier. Die Hex van Hex Rivier.
It's a nice thing to say.
Die Hex van Hex Rivier. It is a very, And then you say it in English, witch of Hex River.
Yeah.
It doesn't flow.
No, but that's just some of the Afrikaans idioms as well. It sounds really good in Afrikaans, but as soon as you translate it, it loses its authenticity.
Yeah,
if that makes
but
sense.
I think with most languages it tends to do that because...
Like the Bible.
Yeah, it has that impact on the person in your country, in your language.
In your language, yeah. And not only that, but lost in translation.
Oh, definitely, 100%.
Again, the Bible.
Again, I don't really care.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, cool.
But if you take something silly like Afrikaans idiom, soos 'n aap op 'n stokkie. Like a monkey on a stick.
Oh, monkey on a stick.
Like a monkey on a stick. It doesn't make sense.
But there's a lot of things, if you directly translate it, it doesn't make sense. And then you're like, yeah. Oh, like a vloermoer.
Yeah.
Which is a vloermoer is Afrikaans for a tantrum. But if you directly translate it, is literally floor hitting or floor...
Floor hitting would be
the best explanation.
Yes.
Yeah. So we do it very literal.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, again, it's just an aap op 'n stokkie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny.
Sure.
I don't know why I'm thinking
Think of aap op 'n stokkie. I know actually Charlize Theron actually did aap op 'n stokkie once in the interview. They asked her about idioms and directly translating and
I think I remember that. I think I've seen it. It was quite funny.
It was actually, I think she was with a Nigerian actor. Was he Nigerian? I think he was.
I can't remember.
They were talking about idioms and things in their culture and their country. But yeah. And your next story?
So my next story, I actually never knew the story behind it because this is also a very South African, not idiom, it's something that happens. So the story is Jakkals trou met Wolf se vrou. So it's just Jackal marries Wolf's wife.
Yes.
So this happens when the sun is shining and it's raining.
Yes.
So
and this is also well known. This is known throughout the entire South Africa.
Did you know the story behind it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've heard different variations.
Yes.
So I don't really know the exact one, because throughout the years, obviously, it gets lost in translation. And,
not only that, but there's a lot of variations. It's the same with Fannings as well. There's a lot of variations. I mean,
it also depends on the region, like
exactly. But I never really kind of knew the story behind it. I just knew the saying of Jackals trouw met wolfse vrou. If you must, jackal marries wolf's wife.
Yeah, like where I grew up,
you had summer rainfall.
We had summer rainfall, so most of the time when it was raining, the sun was shining. So we said it so much growing up, and I think that's why I know more about that story, because it occurred so often in where I grew up. And
where I grew up, it's very rare.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare.
Yeah, because you guys have winter rainfall.
Oh.
Well, you guys, us. We have winter. I live here now as well. We have winter rainfall. What the fuck? Yeah.
But back then.
Back then.
Which is true, because whenever I saw it, I thought, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Jackals trouw met wolfse vrou. Because it's a very rare occurrence.
Yeah.
We had it, I think, a week ago.
Yeah.
And I explained it to a colleague of mine, which is English, and she doesn't understand it. And it's a very difficult thing to explain. To say, this is Jackal wanted to marry Wolf's wife. But in any case, let's go into the story.
Yes.
Jackal is often depicted as a cunning and a mischievous character in local folklore, while Wolf is honest and sometimes easily fooled. Once again, sneaky Jackal tries to fool Wolf. Wolf was going to get married. The date of the wedding was set and animals were coming from all over the land to celebrate the union. But Jackal was jealous of Wolf's new bride, and after having tied Wolf to a tree to stop him from getting married, he went to the bride and convinced her to marry him instead of Wolf by lying about Wolf's intentions towards her. From high above, the sun and the rain, seeing Jackal from his usual tricks, decided to intervene on Wolf's behalf. As the guests gathered for the wedding in the veld, the rain released a few drops that pitter-pattered onto the guests and chased everyone inside for shelter. Once the guests went inside, sun came out again, glowing at the brightest and making it uncomfortably hot in the shelter, forcing the guests back into the open veld. Once again, the rain let forth its pitter-patter of droplets, chasing the guests inside. Again the sun shone its brightest, chasing the guests outside. Back and forth the rain and sun pitter-pattered and shone brightly, stalling the ceremony until Wolf had freed himself from his bonds and made his way to the wedding to explain to his wife the awful trick that Jackal had played upon the happy couple. From then on it had been said that whenever the sun shines while it's raining, it is said, Jackal trouw met wolfse vrou. We might call it Jackals trouw met wolfse vrou, but you might know it better as a sun shower.
Yeah, weirdly enough, even growing up and seeing it so often, it was still...
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It's beautiful. It was still... And
all the droplets are on, every green surface, especially in where you grow up, where it's so green.
And because it was so hot, I went to go sit outside, even during the thunderstorms. I used to go sit outside and I loved the smell of the warm...
It's a very nice smell, I have to say.
The warm, what do you call it? I almost said floor. The warm street.
The warm pavement.
Yeah, the warm pavement, and then the water hitting it, and then it releases the smell. You could actually literally see the steam coming from it, and it was so cool. I used to just go sit outside, and it was usually very big droplets. It's not like actual rain.
Like a mist rain. It's big droplets.
It's big droplets, and it's obviously a few. It's not like a very hard rainfall, because obviously there's no clouds. It would be fucking weird if there's a hard rainfall. So, but it is a very beautiful sight. Yeah, so even seeing it every single summer, almost every week, it was still such a magnificent. It was still such a beautiful thing to see every day.
Yeah, it is. I mean, even though we here in Cape Town or at the Point, where we get it very rarely, it's still something to
Yeah.
behold.
And
Because you sometimes do see a rainbow
yeah, you do see
on
a
the dark
rainbow.
side of
And
the clouds.
now, because I haven't lived where I grew up in more than 10 years, when I do see it now, it's almost like a nostalgic feeling.
Yeah.
So it's that how beautiful it looks as combined with nostalgia. So it's just, I still love it.
Exactly. It's just funny to think about differences. I mean, in summer rainfall and winter rainfall, and there's like literally a 7-hour drive difference between
Depending
where
on
I grew up.
and where I grew up, depending on how fast you drive, it's usually about 8 hours.
Yeah, we did it in
But
7
your dad
months.
did it in 7 hours.
We did it in 7 hours.
No, it's usually about 8 hours.
Yeah.
Say average 8 hours.
We did it in 7. And it's quite funny, the differences. Literally just the differences. And not just that, the differences in temperature in the sea.
Oh,
The
yes.
sea temperature. And not just that, the colour of the fucking beach. I
Yeah.
can't get over it. It's ugly. I'm sorry. It's ugly. It's brown. It's ugly. I can't.
Not all the beaches in that area was brown.
I know. The ones I've seen is brown.
Yeah, but you didn't go to the right beaches.
Brown.
Most of the ones I saw wasn't just brown. It's a lot finer.
Yellow as well.
The yellow as well. There's not a lot of white beaches.
See, I grew up with white
sand.
beaches.
But also the sand, I feel like in those areas where I grew up is a lot finer. And I think that's why it's darker. Because, yeah, it's more...
It's bigger.
It's bigger. It's more... You can
Coarse.
see the shells, the seashells that's broken, mixed with the sand, where the beaches where I grew up, there's not a lot of shells on the beach.
You don't.
It's mostly just sand. There's not a lot of shells on the beach.
It's just funny, how...
But I feel like it's because the water is warmer.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Because the water is so warm. I just couldn't believe it. The first time I put my foot in those warm waters, I almost said cold waters, those warm waters, it's just unbelievable.
And because I grew up with it, I never knew how warm it was until I got here, and I felt like my legs were going to fucking freeze off. I did do the mistake of swimming in the winter. I literally came out pink.
I'm surprised you
And
came
there was
out
a
pink.
literal line of where the water stopped.
Why did you do that to yourself?
I was young and stupid. I'm still stupid now, just old and stupid. But I was just, I was a teenager. I was 16 years old, man. We were enjoying ourselves and it was winter break, I would say. And I was visiting a friend at her family beach house. And we decided, let's just go to the beach because we're bored in the house. So we thought, let's just go swim. But you could there was a literal line on my body from where the water
I would literally believe you, because I know for a fact in the summertime our water gets about 22 degrees max, maybe 24 in the shallow ends.
Yeah, I just want to say, depending on how deep you are
in the shallow ends.
Yeah.
And that's in the summer, like dead in the summer.
Yeah. So see, where I grew up, when you surf, you don't wear wetsuits.
Because it's warm.
It's warm. When you surf here, you always, doesn't matter if it's in
double
the middle.
bag, basically.
Exactly. Doesn't matter if it's in the middle of summer, you still wear a wetsuit.
You wear a thick
wetsuit, yeah.
And you know what's the funniest thing? Now, if you go to the beach here, the beach water here is a bit warmer than it is in Lambert's Bay.
Lambert's Bay.
If you go to Lambert's Bay,
so there it's cold.
It's fucking
See,
cold.
I was there during winter. It wasn't summer, so it was anyway cold.
I was there in summer. It's fucking
cold.
cold.
But we didn't go swim because I was with you. So why would we go swim?
It's not nice.
I like the ocean and I love swimming. It's just that I can't handle the salt water. And I feel like the salt level here is a lot higher than in where I grew up. Yeah, because I don't remember. My eyes did burn, even if I don't.
I think it's also probably the temperature as well.
I just want to say maybe it is the temperature as well.
Because the water here is very cold.
Yeah, so the salt level is so much higher for me.
Okay, so for the next one, we decided to do Japan.
Yes, so next folklore is going to be Japan. And then follow us on our social medias.
Tell us what you thought about our folklore episodes. We'd like to hear your voices.
Yes, and if you have any suggestions or ideas for what we can do for future months' podcasts, that would be appreciated. As well as, please, if you can, support us on Patreon. It starts with only $1.50 a month. $1.50 a month.
I was just about to say
I don't know.
It's Friday.
Words, it's difficult, you know. So definitely, please support us if you can afford it. And that's it.
Cheers for years.
Cheers for years.